Thank you so much for joining us today for another WOW webinar. My name is Nora Luongo, and I am on the internal marketing team here at Whereoware. Today, we're being joined by Big Squid, which is really exciting to talk to you today about Predictive Analytics 101. We will be recording this webinar, as you can see on the screen, and we will be sending the slides and the recording and other resources out to you either today or tomorrow, so keep a lookout for that in your email. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Nick and Brian to take it away.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Salka, and I'm a business analyst here at Whereoware. And I've worked in the data and analytics field for the last 6 years. And I've spent the last 3 years here at Whereoware helping develop our analytics infrastructure and predictive models for our clients.
Great, and I'm Nick Magnuson. I'm the head of product at Big Squid. As we'll learn in a little bit here, Big Squid is a predictive analytics software company. I've been here about 3 years, and more broadly been using quantitative models, quantitative approaches to different business problems for the last almost 20 years. So very excited to talk to you today about what we're doing, and more specifically what Whereoware is doing with our technology.
Great, and just a little bit about Whereoware. We are a privately held digital agency with over 19 years of experience, and we're located in the Washington, D.C. area. And we help our clients by doing a lot of really cool stuff, from developing personalized websites and email marketing to mobile app development, SEO, and PPC. And then we are specializing in data and predictive analytics, which is going to be today's topic. And we do all of that for a very wide variety of clients in many different industries, as you can see here. These clients range from e-commerce to service companies in both the B2B and B2C spaces.
Cool. And then with regard to Big Squid, we've been in business for about 9 years. It originally was a digital marketing and analytics company. About 4 years ago, the company pivoted pretty hard into just pure analytics and deploying business intelligence solutions for customers of all varieties. As you'll see here, we've done over 700 deployments of analytics platform solutions for various customers. And one of the things that we noticed early on was that, when you're deploying BI, you're getting a view of real-time data, historical data, but a lot of those platforms are missing the ability to be able to predict the future as to what's going to happen with those key business metrics. So we've raised capital and have started to build out our platform, Kraken. And again, we'll get into more detail about what that is later today. In terms of our client roster, as I mentioned before, it ranges from anywhere from small, medium-sized businesses that are really just trying to get a better grip on the future of their business and various metrics that support that, all the way up to your Fortune 10 companies like Univision, UnitHealth Group, et cetera. So I think one of the things to take away from today's talk is machine learning, predictive analytics is applicable to any size business, whether you're in, you're very localized, you're global, or anything in between. So if we flip forward a couple of slides, just as this is Predictive Analytics 101, one of the things I wanted to start out with was level set on what predictive analytics really is. And it's actually a really complicated question, but if I were to summarize it in a single sentence, it's the ability to know what's going to happen before it happens with some level of confidence. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about how we arrive at that. If we flip forward a couple of slides, one of the things that's going on in the marketplace, one more slide, please, is there's increased interest, and this is really why Big Squid exists today as a software company in the space. More and more companies, regardless of industry, geography, or even the type of roles that are within those organizations, are starting to contemplate using more sophisticated analytics, oftentimes in the form of predictive analytics, to understand and get a better grip of what's likely to happen with their specific portion of the business. So as you can see here, just in terms of marketing, a lot of CMOs now are using predictive analytics of one variety and another to better understand and target their specific customers. Now, if we talk about what predictive analytics is in a little bit more technical detail, really what we're talking about is using the data you've collected historically and using various approaches to understand the patterns within that data to better predict future outcomes, right? So let me give you an example. We may have data on whether our customers have repurchased. And what we're trying to do is capture data about those customers prior to the point of that repurchase, the characteristics, meaning attributes about the customer, their demographic, et cetera, so that we can use those historical outcomes to learn what drives them to repurchase, and therefore we can apply that going forward and have a more intelligent communication with our customers so that we can get them to drive more repurchase behavior. Now, the specifics around how that's actually done are probably beyond today's talk, but there are various statistical methods to do this, data mining methods to do this. One of the more common approaches to do this predictive analytics work is using what's called machine learning, and that's effectively using very sophisticated math to learn those patterns in that data that I just described, and then effectively output an equation that you can use going forward to predict future outcomes with a higher level of confidence, certainly than you would today. Now, it may not surprise you if we think about what other technology companies are doing today. Adoption of machine learning and predictive analytics is more widespread than one might think. You've probably heard of Netflix or using Amazon or Netflix for your TV viewing. And let's be clear, like, these technologies are not perfect. Like, how many times have you got into your movie title queue, a movie that you have absolutely no interest in? But these recommendation systems are based on machine learning, right? They're based on the ability to learn what you and like customers have viewed and recommend to you things that you're more likely to like and to want and to use. So again, this is the key here is it's adaptive, right? These processes that these companies use, and ours included, are adaptive, meaning they'll continue to learn, and therefore over time we'll have improved performance and the like. So one of the key questions for this audience, everybody, of course, being on this webinar is interested in it, but why is it important? And if I were to distill this down, I think there's three things that, for me, make predictive analytics a very important initiative for any business. And one is, given the amount of data that most businesses are collecting nowadays, it's almost entirely impossible to assimilate all that data without the assistance of some sort of machine learning or predictive analytics engine. There's just too much data to comb through with the naked eye. Secondarily, you want to be able to use that data and render it back to you real-time predictions or real-time insights that you can then take action on, right? So if I'm an analyst and I'm combing through this data, it may take me days, if not weeks, in order to come through with some sort of insight that the business can then act on. And that's, in most cases, that's just too late. And then the last thing is, because we're using machines and other technologies, it is free of human bias, at least free of human bias to the extent that that bias doesn't exist in our data. But the point here is that as an analyst, if I'm going through and trying to create some sort of recommendation by analyzing the data, I may believe I'm unbiased, but everybody has their own biases. So when you think of these three things and look at the applications to which they're being applied, it's pretty widespread. Everything from detecting fraud, as a financial services organization in particular, to talking about improving marketing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today as well. And operations, reducing risk. Again, these are all kind of broad stroke initiatives that predictive analytics can be used in the capacity I just described to make more informed and better decisions. So one of the things that, as a result of all of this, it's creating a lot of hype around this particular type of analytics and the technology that supports it. A lot of folks believe that there is sort of a crystal ball out there that if you ask any question of it, it'll give you a 100% accurate prediction of what's likely to happen in the future. And the one thing that we stress with our customers is really its journey. And that journey looks a little bit like this diagram. that Gartner has produced, Gartner being a third-party research entity that specializes in IT and technology-related technologies, I guess. So they have this framework where most companies go through this value journey where they're extracting increasing amounts of value from their data and from their analytics. If you go from left to right, the kind of starting point, not even on this chart, is like, do you even have a view of what's happening with your business? A lot of companies that we talk to are wishing that they did, right? So they go from something recording, like Excel hell, to a point where they can actually see what's happening in their business in virtual real time. That would be that descriptive phase, right? We can now report on what's happening in our business, which when we have that ability, when it becomes a low burden to produce that level of insight, we start to ask more questions, and the next question we may ask is, why did it happen, right? So we know what happened. Now, why did it happen? If we know why it happened, then we can potentially start to predict what's likely to happen, right? So that's predictive. And then if we know what's likely to happen, of course, we want to be able to influence it and change it so the outcomes that are expected to happen are more advantageous to us. So that's where we get to prescriptive. Now, as you see here, the why this is on an X and Y axis here is it's increasingly difficult to get to those higher levels of value through your data. And one of the things that we'll talk about in just a minute here is because the ability to deploy those higher level solutions is contingent upon resources that are very scarce. But before we get there, let me just dive into what descriptive maybe looks like if we follow this analytics journey through the lens of a marketer or a marketing organization, right? So in the early phases of being descriptive, you may have a marketing team or marketing program that is tracking events, and based on being close enough to the outcomes of those events, they're then able to make guesses of what's likely to happen next, right? So this is sort of your descriptive phase. You're able to describe what happened, and again, because you're close to it, you can maybe infer what's likely to happen next. Now, the next version or the next iteration of this really occurred through asking why, right? So why is this happening? Which resulted in a lot of the A/B testing that became very popular, where you're trying to test a hypothesis versus some alternative, which led to an understanding of why. It led to the ability to actually score leads. So the traditional lead scoring methodology is sort of a multi-factor scoring, where you're assessing and giving higher values to attributes that historically have led to lead conversion, for instance. But the key thing here is that historical framework that you're basing it on, you had to create a rubric for it. You had to create a scoring methodology. And the difference between going from lead scoring to lead prediction using predictive analytics or machine learning is there's no need for that rubric, right? So when we get to that point where we can actually start to use machine learning, the traditional approach, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, is to deploy this through a scarce resource in the form of a data scientist, right? So they'll build this thing in a language like R or Python, and they'll deploy out to you an output that you have little understanding or transparency into, and ultimately leaves the business a little bit, I don't know, not understanding exactly what happened, but willing to take a little bit of a bet. So what happens if you're not a data scientist or your organization doesn't have a data scientist? Flip ahead, please. Right. So in our mind, this is in today's world, this is a problem that we can solve for, right? So the data scientist, if you think about what they bring to any organization, and it's not to discredit data scientists, they're great, but they are very hard to find. And the reason they're hard to find is because they are the intersection of four key skill sets. One is they have the ability to work with data, right? And maybe it's with SQL, maybe it's some other language, but their ability to transform, manipulate data so as to present that data in a way that supports a particular business objective, right? Secondarily, they have the business acumen, right? This is the ability to understand what the business needs, what are the driving forces, and how to execute and drive adoption within an organization. And I say this is probably the hardest of the four skill sets because oftentimes this necessarily comes with years of experience, years of failure, so to speak, where they learn from that and then are more able to navigate through an organization to affect change. And then lastly, math and statistics. They got to know how to use these and interpret these approaches in terms of the algorithms that are used, and the ability to deploy them in code via traditional like R and Python languages that are often used by these individuals. Now, in today's world with virtual free computing power, virtual free compute storage, you've got open source languages with a lot of these machine learning solutions already kind of baked into them. We believe that through technology, we can harness the data skills and, more importantly, the business acumen of your, let's say, traditional business analyst or your data analyst within an organization. So maybe a line of business marketing analyst that can use technology like this, given the acumen and understanding of the needs of the business, to create what we call citizen data scientists, where they can effectively build machine learning and predictive analytics models without needing to open up a console and program, without needing to know the rigorous statistics behind each of these approaches. And that's what we're really focused on, right? And so a lot of today's talk is about how to use this sort of technology as an analyst within an organization to create more insight, to create change. So flip ahead here. The need for a data scientist is no more. Obviously, they're great to have as a resource. In fact, a lot of our customers do, but it's not necessary. So with that, let me pass this over to Brian, and he can get into more detail about specifics around how Whereoware is doing just this.
Thanks, Nick. So many of you guys might be asking yourselves, how can I start using predictive analytics today? And I wanted to discuss the steps that we follow here at Whereoware when we build predictive models. And then I wanted to share the details of a case study involving how we used Kraken to develop specific models that we've deployed for our clients. So I know that it might be, it might seem trivial, but the first step is that you always want to define your objective. And when it comes to predictive analytics, that objective is going to be, what is it that you want to predict? So this is where you're going to start to develop your strategy for getting everything that you need to start making predictions. But more importantly, you want to start deciding how you're going to use that information. So think of this as your big 30-foot view overlooking everything. If you want to begin making predictions today, you have to know what data you have available. So you want to start asking yourself questions like, what data do we have access to? How can we get it? And is that data usable to make predictions on? And this is where you're really going to also collaborate with teams internally within your organization so that you guys come together to start to think about the metrics that are going to help contribute to your predictions. And you also want to start thinking about different scenarios and how you're going to be able to use the results of those predictions. If you end up with a result that is favorable and what you expected, what do you want to do with that? If the result is bad and not within your expectations, what is it that you want to do with that information as well? And then lastly, you want to be able to take action on that data, because at the end of the day, predictions are useless unless you act on the results. And as part of our case study, we're going to walk through how we took action on those results. So now that you've created your strategy, you want to start putting together a plan to put into action. And you want to start with gathering and storing the data. So most of the data that you're going to be using to make predictions is going to live in a lot of different systems, either within your organization or outside of your organization. And this is where you're going to want to start to connect all of those data sources so that everything can live in one place. And by having all of your data connected in one place, it's going to allow you access to tell more detailed stories about what's going on with your business or your client's business. And for us to do that, we use a business intelligence tool called Domo, and we can get into that in a little bit later. So after you've gathered all of that data, you want to define and cleanse it. So you've connected everything. Now you need to start cleaning that data. And what we mean by cleaning data is that you just want to identify and correct for missing or incomplete data within your systems. Dirty data is going to be the major obstacle that's going to prevent you guys from doing useful things within your organization. And cleaning data is also going to be one of the most time-consuming aspects of the predictive process. But you want to keep in mind that the cleaner your data, the more valuable your predictions are going to be. And then after you connect it and clean the data, you want to focus on visualizing it, because that's going to help you identify trends, and it's going to add insights for making better business decisions. And the goal here with visualizing the data is that you want to try to see the results of your business from new and just different perspectives, because that's going to really help you moving forward. And I also wanted to touch a little bit on some of the skill sets that are needed in order to go through the steps that we just discussed. So when it comes to gathering data, you know, like I mentioned earlier, the data is going to be living in a lot of different systems. And business intelligence tools today, they make gathering and connecting your data very easy. However, you're still going to need someone with data management experience that can help you identify what data sources you need and how these data sources are going to talk to each other so that you can tell that more complete story. So to prepare the data for a predictive modeling exercise is also going to require somebody who understands both the data and the business problem. And that relates back to Nick's slide earlier, where you're trying to find that data scientist that has both the technological skills and the business skills. And the benefit of having someone that understands both the data and the business problem is that they can help define what data needs to be used. They understand the types of data that exist, and they know the different data sources that can be combined, both from a technical standpoint, but more importantly, they know how to tell the story from a business perspective. And that's where you're going to really, truly add value to your clients and within your own personal organization as well. And then lastly, cleansing your data. There's a lot of different methods to cleansing the data. I think we're all familiar with Excel here. And Excel would be a good choice for projects that require small amounts of data, or for just an ad hoc analysis that doesn't require full automation. SQL would be a programming language that is used to access larger amounts of data. So SQL is just going to give you a lot more power and more flexibility to simplify that cleansing process. And then when you start to look at business intelligence tools like Domo, which is what we use, that's going to simplify everything, because it's creating a single environment for you to do all of your data-related tasks, whether that's integrating the data, storing it, cleansing it, visualizing it. All of that can be done in one place so that you can automate the entire process. And by automating the entire process, you're going to be able to spend a lot more time focusing on making business decisions. And Nick mentioned earlier Excel hell, and I think that everyone involved in data has either experienced this chart or is currently experiencing this chart. And as somebody that has lived through both the Excel days and the Domo days, I'm here to say that Domo has fundamentally transformed how we do analytics within our organization, because it has been saving us weeks, if not months, of digging through and cleansing data, which before used to be a very manual process. So the days of using Excel and VLOOKUPs to do reporting, they're over for us. And we no longer need to worry about those manual processes that are prone to errors and take days or weeks to finish. We now live in an automated world where we receive accurate and timely information so that we can make the smartest decisions. And the tools available today, they're allowing for organizations to have smaller, more focused teams. And by introducing predictive tools like Kraken, that means that more people are going to be able to build analytical and predictive models without the use of data scientists. And you're still going to need that data or business analyst who can help you interpret and refine the results of your model. And where you're going to leverage your IT support is going to be from the deployment of that model. And what we mean by that means that's where we're going to put the models to work on the chosen data that we want to predict on, and that's where you're going to find the results. So you can see how these advanced tools have really simplified a team which used to require extensive IT support in a lot of different versions of that. And we covered this chart earlier, so by now you can see how these specific data scientist skill sets are now made available to a more broad audience. With tools like Kraken, all of the focus goes into interpreting the model results and making business decisions, not on the manual process of hard coding all of the statistics and the math that you would need, when you start to look back long ago as to how we needed to do this particular type of stuff. And a lot of platforms are starting to integrate predictive capabilities within their tools. And these tend to be useful for making basic predictions, but all of those predictions are going to exist within that specific platform. So, it's a great way to help you get started. However, tools like Domo and Kraken, they're going to be able to piece all of these different platforms together, and it's going to allow you to look at all of those sources that could potentially influence your prediction. And that's why it's really valuable to bring all of those sources together, because you don't know what is influencing your data, and you have to bring those outside influencers all together, and that's what Domo and Kraken do fantastically. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nick for a couple more slides, and then I'm going to reconvene and I'll walk through our case study on how we used Kraken for our predictive model.
Yeah, just picking up where Brian left off there, in terms of being able to assimilate any data that you think is relevant to some business outcome that you care about. That's really the reason why our platform is data in BI agnostic. So what that means, if you think about what Brian just said in terms of the process that he goes through and he walked through, you store your data, you cleanse your data, and you visualize your data. And in our mind, that's roughly, data storage. ETL is that cleansing layer and visualization. This is the analytics investment that most organizations have either made or are starting to make. And there's various tools, depending on what your business needs are, that fit each one of these pillars. And again, our platform, our machine learning predictive analytics platform, is meant to sit on top of this in a very agnostic fashion, such that you can then bring forecasting and prediction into this workflow, and most importantly, because it's agnostic, into the workflow that you, your analysts, your team are accustomed to using, whether it's Domo, which is sort of a full suite solution across these different pillars, or whether you've got your warehouse standing up in a MySQL warehouse and you don't even have ETL. That's the whole point of our product, is to be able to fit into what workflow that you're already using, so that you don't have to go through a process of a new technology. Really, we're bolting onto the existing analytics investments you've made. In terms of where our customers like to get started, this next slide is awfully busy, and I don't expect anyone to be able to read the fine print. But really, one of the biggest impediments to getting predictive analytics going within an organization is trying to figure out where to start, right? The technology, the implications are pretty profound, which almost creates a barrier to trying to figure out where to start. So what we've done here, this is not comprehensive, but what we've tried to do is enable people to understand within a particular vertical, an industry, and a role within it, where are some of the common starting points that we see across our customers and across the marketplace. So for instance, if we're looking at a marketing department, continuing the theme that I was talking about earlier, in the retail space, a lot of the use cases are around trying to understand product or brand affinity. And again, this is all with the emphasis on trying to be able to target those customers in a more intelligent and more meaningful way. Promotion strategies. If you're in the services business, it may be understanding the implications from running promotions. Maybe lifetime value is a key thing that you want to be able to understand, right? So not spending all your marketing dollars across all of your customers, but spending those dollars where they're going to have the most impact and can drive real value for your business long term. So again, this is just a starting point, not meant to be comprehensive, but again, our opinion is a lot of people that want to get into this space need a little bit of a nudge in terms of where to start and get the wheels turning.
Thanks, Nick. And now I just wanted to share the ways that we used Domo and Big Squid to predict churn for our client MudPie. And what we mean by predict churn is basically we were trying to figure out which clients of MudPie were not going to buy from them again. And for those of you that don't know, MudPie is a B2B wholesaler and B2C retailer that operates in the gift and home space. And when it comes to predicting churn, MudPie's challenge is similar to what any B2B wholesale company faces. And there's a very short range of time when their customers are actually looking to purchase each year. And in the past, by the time MudPie realized that a customer had churned, it was too late for them, and they had missed the entire purchasing window for the year for that client. So as part of their big picture strategy, they asked us if we could attempt to do two things. And one, which is identifying the customers that were going to stop buying from them. So that was our primary objective. And if you recall earlier, making predictions by itself is fairly useless if you can't take action on it. So the second thing that they asked us was is there a way to re-engage those customers in order to keep them buying from MudPie? And had it not been for tools like Domo or Big Squid, this would have been an impossible task for us to be able to merge all of those different data sources together. So in order to identify which clients are likely to churn, we needed to start out with getting all of the data, if you recall from the steps that we discussed earlier. So with Domo, we were able to combine and connect all of those multiple sources of buying behavior data from their website, from their back office, offline data. We were able to integrate that with our custom mobile app Spotlight. We were able to bring all of that data seamlessly right into Domo. And then once that data was there, we were able to clean it and combine it so that we had usable data to make predictions on. So then one of the benefits of Big Squid, like Nick mentioned earlier, is that it sits right on top of your business intelligence tool. So we were able to quickly import this newly cleaned data set right into Big Squid's Kraken so that we could start making predictions on which customers were likely to churn. And Kraken did a fantastic job of helping us easily identify which metrics were the most valuable at predicting churn. And it also helped us identify which model was the best type to use. And as a result, the system assigned a probability of churn to each underlying email address of MudPie's customers. So what we mean by that is, if I'm Brian at Whereoware, right next to my name within the data, we would have a probability. Let's just say I was 90% likely to churn. You would have that insight for every single underlying email address within the database based on this type of logic here. And this resulted in the successful identification of all of their clients that were likely to never buy again and the specific probabilities that they were not likely to buy again. So, and the best part about that is that the system will continue to learn. So as those clients either continue to not buy or maybe re-engage, whatever it is, all of those probabilities can continue to change in an automatic way based on all of that new data that is flowing into your model. So we've accomplished step one for MudPie, which is identify the customers. So we next needed a way to make that data actionable for our clients. So one of the great things about Domo is that not only can it ingest data, but it can also push data out to other sources. So by taking advantage of this capability, we were really able to push the results of our predicted data set into our email automation platform, which was Watson Campaign Automation. So now once this data was in Watson, our marketing team was able to start to use that data to create customized content in order to re-engage the clients that were likely to or were at risk of churning. And that content could be anything from sales discounts to free delivery. But because we have the data and the buying patterns of people already in our model, we no longer have to guess at which offer is best. We can finely tune that to each individual customer. And our marketing team is getting that every single day, this new updated data of all of their clients that are likely to churn. And now they can create customized content to distribute that out. And as data analysts, we hate to write words, so we draw pictures to convey what we mean. So this is a picture format of everything that I just said. So what this is flow visuals to describe our entire churn model process. So if you see on the left, that's just us bringing together all of the different data sources in one spot into Domo. And then you can see that Big Squid's PTK and Kraken sit right on top of Domo so that we can put those newly cleaned predicted data sets right into that, where it's going to create all of the math and do all of the calculations that we need. And then we have it linked over to Watson Campaign Automation, which is where our marketing team is going to take that data on a daily basis and then send out that customized content to our clients. And this would be an example of what some of the customized content would look like. You can see up at the top how we have personalized website banners. We say that it's been a while, save 20% with a coupon code, whether it's free disc or free shipping, free freight, whatever it might be. But the best part about this is that we don't have to guess at what those offers should be, because we now know all of the data. We see what influences the data. And by having insight into that, we can pinpoint what the most effective offer can be. And this is incredibly important because if you were to just give a really exceptional offer, you're going to drown out the results of your model. So for example, if we have a list of people that we think are going to predict to churn, we want to know that we're doing everything we can to re-engage them, but you also want to know that the model is the reason behind that effectiveness. So you want to pinpoint an actual relevant type of offer so you don't drown out the results of that. So for example, if we just said save 100%, then obviously everybody would re-engage because it's just 100% discount. So you kind of are going to drown out the results of the model, but we now have insights to pinpoint to that. And if you can recall, these are some of the lessons that we've learned today. You know, we've went over defining our objective, which in the world of predictive analytics is going to be to define what it is that you want to predict. You know, we talked about the steps needed to gather, define, and clean your data. And then we talked about the steps as far as building, testing, and deploying that model. And that all comes into play to make that data actionable. That's both where you want to identify who's likely to predict and make actions by deploying that model. And then once you have that flowing, all of that data is going to start collecting. The actual model is going to start to learn based on that new data that's flowing into that. And that's when you can really take advantage and start predicting instead of just reacting to your business. And that's really where the true value in predictive analytics lies, is that even if you don't know exactly what's going to happen, it creates an environment for you to be prepared for all situations, because you don't want to be caught by surprise with something when you don't have to, especially with all of the tools and technologies available today. And with Domo and Kraken, we were really able to transform our business into what it is today, and we continue to leverage their tools, and it's been a fantastic addition to our analytics infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nora, who is going to talk about the special offers that we're offering.
Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you so much, Brian and Nick, both for going through and giving us an awesome presentation today. In addition to sending you the slides and recording and some other resources, we also want to promote some special offers that we are offering our webinar attendees. So from Whereoware, you can get a free 30-minute consultation with our customer insights team. And Big Squid is offering a free machine learning lab. So they'll build a personalized automated machine learning roadmap with one of their data science experts, which is an awesome opportunity to definitely talk through what you learned here in this webinar and see how it can apply to your company. And with that, we're going to take questions. So if you haven't already wrote us questions in the question box, feel free to do that now. And I will moderate the questions. So we just got one here. If I deployed predictive analytics with Kraken, how can I validate the results? Put another way, how do I know that I'm using the right model or models and getting the most bang for your buck?
All right, well, I'll take that one. So there's a couple things that we do. One is inside the platform, and this is getting a little bit into the details of how machine learning and predictive analytics models are built. We actually take all that historical data, as I mentioned, and learn the patterns within it, one. And then two, you actually carve out a piece of that historical data, and you take the model you learned in that historical data and then apply it to that test data. And what that allows you to do is ascertain, based on the model that you've built and that's learned from that data, how accurate it is in a data set that it has never even seen before. So that's one way. Two, a lot of our customers, especially when they're starting to get their feet into this particular discipline, will build a model, and what they'll do is they'll deploy it into production and monitor it for some period of time. It just gives them the assurance, really, that the approach is sound, and that they have more confidence maybe rolling it out to a broader part of the organization. So again, we do that natively in the product. For some customers, they want to go above and beyond that, and they'll actually deploy and monitor results in real time, live, for some period of time to get, again, a little bit more assurance as to the validity of the model.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, one of the great things about Kraken is that after you set everything up, the results that it's going to provide you how different models look and how accurate and precise each model compares to each other. So depending upon what it is that you're trying to predict, you'll be able to see which type of model you want to use and what the accuracy and precision is for each of those models right there at your fingertips.
Thanks so much. Going back, Brian, when you were talking about gathering all your data, you said you can make predictions based on that, but how do you know that the data that you have is right to make predictions from?
So I think that's where it's going to come from your business intuition. And using an example for churn, when we go to predict churn, you want to start focusing your data gathering on what's going to be relevant to that. So if we say we want to predict churn, that has to do with the buying patterns of individuals. So we need to start looking at the buying behavior data. So whether that's past sales data, what they bought, when they bought it, all of those types of things you want to bring in. Now, you're not going to know exactly what it is that is going to contribute to those predictions, but you want to have a general idea. And then after you feed that information into Kraken, Kraken is going to do the work that is going to show you which of those metrics are better at influencing what it is that you're trying to predict. So I think what you want to do is use your business intuition to gather the correct types of data initially, and then put that into the system. And that's where you're going to have a lot of flexibility to play around with the specifics of the metrics.
Great. Do either of you have experience using Kraken and Power BI together?
Do you want to take that
question directed? Yeah, I'll take that question. So we have built some initial solutions in an integration that uses Kraken and then outputs that data to be consumed by Power BI as your primary visualization layer. So the answer is yes. Do we have any customers today that are on that setup? The answer would be no. But we have proven the ability to do that. Again, for us, as you saw on that initial slide, we have Kraken and your three pillars of data storage, ETL, and visualization. Really, we're agnostic. You could be Power BI, it could be anything else. It's just that's the layer in which you're consuming the insights that come out of Kraken. So to answer the question directly, yes. Do we have customers? No. But if there's somebody in the audience that wants to step up and be the first one, we'd be happy to entertain that discussion.
Great. Brian, you got a question directed to you. How do you merge web activity data with customer CRM data?
How do you merge CRM data with what type of data? Sorry?
Web activity data.
So that's going to be dependent upon where that data is coming from. So not all data is going to be able to be combined, right? Because, for example, if you're taking web activity data from Google Analytics, let's say, you already have aggregated data. So you can't get down to the user level. So joining it at a user level with CRM type data might not be the best option. So your web analytics data is going to really be dependent upon what it is that you use. So if you were using something, say, like Adobe Analytics, we could then pull out whether it be the message name or an individual email address or some sort of ID that indicates the user, and then merge that on the same information within the CRM system, which is most likely going to have an email address or that same corresponding type of ID. And at that point, that's when you're going to want to use your technologies, whether it be SQL or whatever it is that you use to join those two sources of data on that ID or email address. And then that way you have both of the data from both systems right there at your fingertips so that you can have that more complete story to see what is actually influencing both sides of things.
Awesome. Sorry for that delay. This next question kind of is related to that. So talking about how exactly do you combine different data sources in Domo? I think that goes along with, joining up the keys that, if you have an email address in one, email address in other, you can combine those keys. But also, how do you deal with data integrity issues?
No, that's great. And one of the great things about Domo now is it allows you to certify the incoming data sources. So by bringing all of that data into Domo, you create this single version of the truth, so to speak. So all of the data that you're bringing out of those underlying systems, it's all coming in the same format. It's all going to be joining to different systems that are also in that same format on whatever ID or email key that comes in. And by bringing it into a platform like Domo, you can set that up automatically to where it's running in. So when you are setting everything up in those initial phases and certifying those data sources to where that everybody understands the rules of the game coming in, all you have to do is flip that automated switch and you can ensure that everything coming in is everything that you are expecting to see. So it kind of governs itself within the platform.
Great. I know before you talked about especially how easy and how quick everything goes now that you've implemented Domo and Kraken instead of using Excel. But can you talk a little bit, either you or Nick, about the timeline? So like from when you implement something or really get things started from that first defining your objective, like how long does it normally take to see this process and really have it come to fruition?
Yeah, I can touch on that from our perspective. And I think that's going to be dependent, the primary difference in time is going to be dependent upon the cleanliness of your data. Because like I said earlier, that's going to be where the majority of your efforts are going to be spent. Because especially if you're bringing it in from old systems or outdated methodologies of collecting that data, odds are that that data is going to need to be cleansed. So when we first started bringing that data in, we had some sources that were incredibly clean and some sources that were incredibly messy. So it's really hard to say, and it also depends on what it is that you're trying to solve. By connecting all of your different sources, that's relatively easy. That's literally just connecting to it via Domo, entering in the credentials to log in, and your data will start flowing in. But that's when you're going to need to spend some time on cleaning it. So it could be an hour, it could be a week. It just depends on how messy the data is.
Yeah, and I can weigh on a more generalized sense across all the customers that we work with. I mean, the timeline to starting a machine learning project to let's call it deployment, where you're actually putting it into a production type setting, can vary quite dramatically, just depending on things like Brian already talked about in terms of the readiness of the data. And then more importantly, the availability of the resources required, stakeholders, et cetera, to get commitment to put something into production. So in general, that can be anywhere from a couple weeks, call it 30 days, to 90 days, maybe a little bit longer, depending on those factors. One of the things that I'd also point out with regard to that rollout is in our mind, and I think this is a best practice that should be adopted, uniformly, is no model, no machine learning project or model is ever perfect and ever complete. What we often find is you build a model and you get some great insight, certainly better than what you're doing today, all right? But at the same time, what it does is it also exposes some of the areas of the business, different types of metrics, different types of behaviors you think influence an outcome, but you are actually not tracking. You have no data to support those hypotheses. So it actually spurs this initiative to go and collect new data or cleanse the data in a more robust way going forward, which in due time will help influence and improve the accuracy of your model. So there's just little things that our customers start to think about after they've deployed their first and maybe second model, is how to make these things better over time.
Great. Nick, we've got a question for you. Is Kraken GDPR compliant?
Very relevant question.
Yeah.
So today, we have plans to move in that direction. The technicalities around that, we're basically, our product is based on AWS, so we use all of their architecture and infrastructure, which in theory would make it quite easy for us to move over to the Dublin instance and therefore meet GDPR requirements. But that's actually something where our team, our dev and ops team, are actively working to ensure that we're compliant there.
Great. And with that, it looks like we're going to wrap up questions. So giving everybody 8 minutes back to their day. Thank you so much for joining us today for another WOW webinar. And stay tuned for info on our webinar that we're hosting at the end of this month. Thanks so much, all.